Hello everyone, welcome back to part 4 of this Next.js and Supabase tutorials. My name is Shadrach, and if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now in this part, we are going to work on the car list page of our website. So we are going to also create our Supabase database, create some tables, and start fetching some real data into our application. Now, as I said, this is part 4 of this tutorial, so you can check out part 1, part 2, part 3. Link is in the description below. So let me show you the finished app, what we are going to be creating in this part. So as you can see, this is the car list section of our application, and here we see all the list of cars based on the region and then the country you've selected. So you select a region, for example here, and then you click on search, and it's going to fetch all the cars that are within that particular region that you search. Alright, so if I select another region, Greater Accra, and I click on search, then we get all the cars in that particular region. And as you can see, we have some filters here that will help us filter some of the cars out. So here is based on the price, here is based on the car body, whether it's bus or maybe it's a sedan or whatever. So if I pick sedan, we don't have sedan cars for this particular range, but if I send it back, you can see we have this one. So you can, if I choose SUV or something, yeah, we have SUV cars as well, but if I choose any, then we see all the cars. So here we have filters that will help you filter the cars you need. Now we also have the search engine at the top here. We have the list of cars showing here. We have this button which help you show and hide the map. So the map is pointing to the region you've actually selected. And yeah, from here you also have the buttons to be able to rent the car, which is going to take you to the car details page for you to make a booking for the car. Alright. Now this is the page we are going to be working on. So we are going to add all these components, and we are going to add our database data so that we can fetch real data into our application. So let's get started. As you can see, this is how far we've come. So we are going to add another page, for example, /cars like this, and that is going to take us to our cars listing page. Right. At the moment, there is no page like that. So if I hit enter right now, it is going to say page not found. Right. So this page could not be found. So I'm going to go back to VS Code, and inside app, I am going to create another page. So here I'm going to create a folder called cars, and inside cars I'm going to add another file, page.tsx. Now as soon as I add this car and I generate my component like this, car listing page like this. Now as soon as I save it and I go back to my page, I should be able to see car listing page. So we have our page in place now. So this is basically the page, and we are going to create the components that we are going to use in this page. So as you guessed, it is going to go into features. So in features, as you can see, I have this folder called cars, and inside cars I have just 3 components that I've added. I am going to show you what is inside them. So this is the main page called cars layout. So this page is basically what we are going to have on our page. Right. It's just a boilerplate of how our layout is going to look like on our cars page. So from the finished app, as you saw, we have the search engine here at the top together with the map, and then on the side here we have the filters, and then on the right side here we have the car list. Right, so that is the layout we have here at the moment. So as you can see, there are some comments here showing the labels for each of the components we are going to be putting here. Right, so let me just connect this component to this page so that you see how it looks like at the moment. Cars layout, and I am going to import it from features cars. Once I close it and I save it, I go back to the page again. Let's visit our page, and once it refreshes, we are going to see our layout, our initial layout. Yep, so as you can see, this is what we have at the moment. We are first of all going to add our search engine. So let's go back, and here, as you can see inside the container, that is where we are going to add our search engine. We've already created our search engine. We used it on our home page, so we are going to use the same components here. Alright, so I'm going to say search engine. Alright, and I'm going to import it from components. Alright, once I close it and I save it, we go back to our page and we should see our search engine at the top here. And there you go. So we have our search engine showing up here. Now the next thing is we are going to add this hide map show map button, as you can see here. So we have this button here which hides and show the map when you click on it. Right. So I'm gonna change this to light theme as well so that we see the background well. So let's add that button next. So I'm gonna go back to VS Code again, and here this is where I have the label. So inside this flex container, I am going to put a button here. This is how my button is going to look like. So initially, this is what we're going to have. So I have this button for Mountain, and I'm using this icon brand Google Maps. Alright, so this is the icon you see. So as you can see here, we have show map. Alright, that's the label. Yeah, as you can see, I'm also using some CSS classes here and here as well. So if I show you the styles, here we have the parent container, and then we have the map toggle, and this basically giving it a background color. We're giving our button background color of transparent. So here we also have a background color and then light dark. So this is basically going to make sure it adapts to our light and dark theme, as I've shown you already. So we use the gray one, and then the body color, which is more like a generic color, and that's what we are using here and here. So if we save and then we come back, we see the button here which is not doing anything at the moment. Let's see why there is not actually fitting the entire width. Yep, so it's now fitting. I needed to add this size 100% for our search engine container. I've got to add that initially. Yeah, our search engine adapts to the width of the container nicely. So let's close that for a second. So the next thing we are going to add is our map, and this is a placeholder for it. So this is where we are going to be putting our map. And we also have the component for our map already, so I'm just going to use that component. Alright, so I'm going to say map, and I'm going to import it from components map like this. And once I close it and I save it, we should see our map on the UI as well. Yeah, and there you go. Our map is also showing up, even though it is not filling the entire width. Let's also check why we don't have it fitting the entire width. So let's go to map, and it looks like it's the same thing. So I can just say size like this, and I can say 100%. Once I do this and it refreshes, yeah, so as you can see, our map is now fitting nicely. But one thing I showed you how we actually load the map onto the page. Alright, so as you can see here, I am loading it directly, which is going to give us issues at some point. So how we want to be loading this map is we want to use dynamic import. At the top here, we put this dynamic import here. Let's import dynamic from next dynamic, and we are going to remove this import from here. Yeah, so as you can see, our map is also displayed nicely. So we are going to be working on adding the component for our filters. So first of all, we are going to add this button which says reset all. So this is supposed to reset our filters. So for example, if I have these filters set to some values and I want to reset them to their default values, when I click on them, it resets my filters, right? So we're going to add this button. So this is the label, the placeholder for it. And let's go back here. Here is where we are going to basically put it. So let's create that component in here. So inside cars, I'm going to add another file called reset filters button. Inside this component, I am going to basically do RAFC to generate my component. And here I'm going to have a simple button with some icon and a text. Alright, so this is how it is going to look like. I have a button here. There is this icon, refresh icon, and there is this text which says reset all. Alright, and I'm going to use that component in here instead of this text. So here I'm going to say reset filters button. So once I save it, I try to go back here, wait for this to refresh, and yeah, I should see my button here. It doesn't do anything at the moment. So the next component to add is this body type component, where you can select the body type of the car you want. So let's look at that. So as you can see, I have a file here called body type, and this is the component for that. So here there is select car type component here, which I've added in components, and as you can see, it is just the regular select component from Mantine. So here we have a width, we have a label saying body type, placeholder, we have sedan for now. Now we have car types, which is more like the list of cars that we are going to have. I'm going to show you right now. We also have a prop called max drop height, that is the maximum height for our select. And then we have the required and message not nothing found message. Right. Now let's first of all use that component and then see how it looks like first. So we are going to use this body type component. Now let's come here, and here where we have our filters components, here we are going to first of all say body type. So this is the component we are going to use first, and we are going to import that. Now once we save it, we should see our select drop down appear on our page. Waiting for this to refresh, and here you go. So we have body type. Alright, so here as you can see, we have a list of cars, and the list of cars is basically coming from here. So I've added all the list of cars that we are going to be needing. As you can see, there is a label and then there is a value. So here when you select any, and then after that, here is the list of all the cars that we've been able to add at the moment. So for example, sedan, luxury sedan, electric sedan, SUV, off-road SUV, convertible, hatchback, sports, van, bus, truck, compact car, coupe, wagon, pickup. There could be more, but yeah, at least for now we have a lot of car body types that we've been able to add. So this is the car types that we are going to be using, and that is what I am basically using here. So what I'm going to do again is first of all, I am going to say that I'm going to basically pass some props to this component to make it generic, because we are going to be reusing this component in other places as well. So it is important to make it generic, and I am going to add some props. I am going to put them here. Alright, so basically I want a label, right? I want the label to be generic, so that if I am reusing it, I can change the label. Now the value, the unchanged, add any. So this is basically a boolean, which is basically going to make sure we get rid of this from here, so that we can reuse this card types if we need, and then only add this property if we want to add this any option, right? You'd see what I'm talking about soon. Let me import this from React, and the required is also going to be passed here. So with that, let's make sure we are getting the values passed here. Alright, so the required is going to have a default value of false. So instead of setting the value here, I'm going to say required. Now I am going to say label. Now it is going to come from here. if there is no label passed, then we are going to use this. So this should be double. Or now the placeholder is fine. We are going to have a value, which is basically going to come from value and then onChange, which is also this onChange function. We are going to add filter here, which is basically going to be a function. I'm going to get a function because I'm going to be reusing the same function for all the other components. I will just export it as a separate function into the functions folder here. So we have functions, and inside functions we are going to have index.ts like this, and we're going to paste this here. So here, options filter, that is the type of filter that our select accepts, and we have to import this from Mantine together with the combo box item from Mantine. Yeah, so this is this function can basically be found on the Mantine website. It shows you how you can write this filter function, so you can basically check it out, but it's very easy to understand when you look at it. So we have this function here. When we come here, we are going to say filter, supposed to be here, so filter, it's called options filter, not filter options. So once we have this here, let's see why our onChange is complaining. It says undefined, not assignable to this. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So we have onChange, which is this. Okay, it looks like the value we pass here, it is either string or null. Yeah, once we do that, this is actually resolved. So when we save it and then we go back to our UI, let's see what we get. There is an error. Alright, so let's make sure we have use client up here. Alright, so let's say use client. Alright, so once we do this, let's make sure we are refreshing this again. And yeah, so when we come here, what this filter is going to do is, as you can see, it sorts the car in alphabetical order, right? From the function, as you can see, it's doing a sort here, sorting it alphabetically. It's making sure that your values are sorted alphabetically, right? So as you can see, from A, B, C, and then others. Now the next component we are going to be adding is this price range component. And as you can see, for our price range, we have two different components for that, right? So we have this number input field that you can basically change from here, and these two components are synced together, right? So when I change it from here, as you can see, this is also changing. So the same way, if I begin to increase it from here, you'd see that it is actually synced with this, right? So the price range consists of the minimum price and then the maximum price. So I want a car which is between 0 to maybe 250 or 490 Ghana cedis. That's the amount, right? So as I change the max price, the max price input field also changes. As I change the min one also changes, right? So these are the two components we are going to be creating, and as you can see, the label is also formatted with this currency here. Alright, so we are also going to see how we can add that. Alright, so let's go back to VS Code. I have this price range component here, right? So here, price range, and I have some constants set here, which is the lowest and then the highest price, right? So I just set this to a very high number. I don't think you'd have a car which is 10,000 Ghana cedis or $10,000 or whatever per day. So I just set this to a high number. You can change it to whatever number you want. But when you come here, this is the text, this is the label, the top label, and here we have the first component, which is the range slider, and we also have these number input fields. Right, this range slider, as you can see, I'm importing everything from Mountain Core. There is a lowest price and then the max price, that is the highest price, which is basically coming from here. And as you can see, it's the same thing I'm using for these and these as well for the number inputs. Now let me use the price range inside my component here. Let's close this. We want the other one, so basically this. So after the body type, we have price range. Alright, so we import this and let's look at how it looks like now. So we go back here, let's wait for this to refresh, and yeah, this is how our price range looks like. So we have the range slider and we have the number inputs. So at the moment we just have a label called this. So what we can do is we can, when we come back here, we can put a label here, which is basically going to be the value that we've actually selected, right? So if we use a function here, so basically we can have something like this, and then this is going to return a string. Here we can have something like value, and we want to say return value dot to string, like this. And then when we save it and we go back, you're going to see that the min and then the max will change to the values. We are getting that error because we need to actually let's put use server up here, not use server, use client. Alright, let's come back here. Let's go back to our page. Once it refreshes, alright, so as you can see, we have the values, right, 0 and then 10,000 here. Now we want to be able to add the currency, so with that we can basically do something like this, right? So here, and then this one is going to be template string with this, and then if you want to put a currency here, we can do something like this. Now if we come back and then we come and check, as you can see, we have it here. Alright, so I don't want to do this in line here. I want to put this in a top level function. So here I'm going to say constant label formatter. It has a value, which is a number. It is an arrow function, and I am going to return something like this. Now with the currency, I have it as a constant, so I want to use that here in case I want to change it in the future to dollars or something. At the moment I'm calling it GH currency, and I can reuse this same currency in different places as well. Okay, so here I need an equal to sign here because it's an arrow function, and I can use that function here instead. Now we can go back and check. Alright, so we have the currency together with the value, and even though it's a bit different than what we have here. So here, because this is a template string, we really don't need this one here. We can basically do this. Alright, so this is looking okay, at least for now. We'll come back and work on this a bit later again. So let's go ahead and add the next component, which is basically the year. Alright, so the year model of the car. So with that, I've got the component here. So here we have a year model component, and as you can see, we are still using the range slider. We have the min date, which is starting from 1990. We have the max 2023, We want to always start the main from 1990. We don't want to rent a car which is below this year. Actually, this is even too small. Is what we want to make it generic, so we are going to change this, but the rest is going to be the same. Right, so we can use this component inside our layout again. So after price range, we have the year. Alright, so year model, and let's make sure we are importing that, and we should be able to see it on our page. Wait for this to refresh. Alright, so as you can see, we have from 1990 to 2023. If we begin to like increase it, as you can see, so here we want to get the current year, and we can do that simply. So let's come up here and do const current year. Alright, so here we do new date, that is we use JavaScript date, and then what we're going to do is we do dot get full year like this, and this is going to give us the current year. So we use that here instead. Now let's save it. We should still see 2023 because we are still in 2023. It refreshes and yeah, nothing changes. So yeah, to prove to you that this is working, if I do +1 here, for example, this is supposed to go to 2024 because we get a full year and we add 1. So if we come back here, we go to max, right, the current year, which is 2024. This component is also done. Let's see the next component to add from here. So we have the year. Now we are going to add transmission. So I have the component for that here. So as you can see, we have this transmission component, and it's a very small component. So as you can see, we are using this segmented control. We've already used some for our team. That's the same component we are using. So segmented control, and here we are going to add the data. So if I connect it, for example, if I come here and I do transmission, alright, so if I connect it and I go back to our app, alright, so if I scroll down, yep, so there is nothing here at the moment, and maybe it's because there is no data. So let's go back and try to add some data. So here, what transmission are we going to have? We're going to have manual, auto, yeah, just the two, and also we are going to have any. Alright, so first of all, we're going to have this any, which is going to say any transmission, and then the second one is going to be automatic. So I get this suggestion from plugin that I have, which is suggesting for me. Right, and then the last one is going to be manual. So we have the value and then the label for these. So we have a list, 3 lists, these 2 main ones, and then this one for if you want to search for any transmission at all. Let's save that, and let's go and check it out. Alright, so as you can see, it's now showing up here. So we select this and this and this. Lastly, we are going to add this fuel type, right, which is basically the type of fuel the car uses. I have added the component here, so fuel type, right, and there is a selector which is coming from component select fuel type. I want to keep this file small because I'm going to be adding like states and other functions later. So I've extracted the actual components, generic components, into separate components like we've been doing. And as you can see, I've also added the props already. So we have the label, value, on change, required, and then add any, as we did for the first one, the other ones. And here we have a list of fuel types that we are going to be using. So gasoline, diesel, LPG, CNG, electric, EV. Yeah, so if you want to add more, you can add more yourself, but this is what we are going to be using for now. And as you can see, we have we have everything wired up here. So the label, if we have a label, we are using that. If not, we are just using this default label as a placeholder. Now this this data for all types, as you can see, we're using the list up here, and the value is coming from the value prop. The unchanged is coming from the unchanged prop. We have this searchable because we want to be able to search, and we also have the filter, which is going to sort it in alphabetical order. So we are using the same options filter that we added in our functions. Yeah, so it's a very simple component as well. Nothing really much going on here. So we don't want to spend a lot of time writing this from scratch. Alright. So with that, I'm using the component here, and when I close this and I come to index, then after transmission, I am going to say fuel type, and I'm going to import it. Alright, so once I import it, I should see that on our page as well. Let's go back to what we are building. Alright, so as you can see, we have fuel type. Alright, cool. There is I mean, this is very close to this. As you can see, there's a bit of spacing for all of these components. So let me see why this is very close to this and add some spacing there. Alright, so I mean, I can easily do that by using a mountain component called space. So if I import that, I can add margin y lg, so it gives some space here. We need that. And then when we go, after it refreshes, we should see some space here. Yeah, there you go. Alright, so this is going to be all the components we're going to have for our filters. Alright, we're going to quickly work on the car list. So the right side here, which is going to show the list of our cars. Alright, so when we come back here, we're basically going to put that after this card. So we are going to use these two components. So as you can see, I have a car list component and a car card component here, right? So let's first of all look at the car list component. So here, this is basically going to get a list of cars, and it's going to use this car card component to create a card component for each of the cars, right? Later we are going to pass a prop to this, which is going to be the list of cars that we are going to fetch from our database. We are going to loop through, and then we are going to render a car card for each one of these, right? Now I have a few props here, which is also making this a display of flex. This justify space between and adding a gap of MD, and as you can see, there is a wrap here as well. And the box is also making it responsive. So on base device it's going to be 100%, but on empty devices, medium device, is going to calculate and then subtract the sidebar width from it, so that it is going to fill the rest of the space. You'll see what I'm talking about soon. But this is the main car card component. Alright, so here, if we come here, as you can see, we have a box here which is showing the name of the car. So the name, the model, and then the year, and then this is the type of the car, which is the body type. So in this case, sedan. So here, Toyota Camry, sedan, and then we also have the image of the car, which we don't have anything in the SRC here for now. So just to be able to get something to show on the page, I'm going to grab one of these car images. Right, so I'm going to right click on this and then say copy image address. Click on this one, and I'm going to come here and then paste that here. Alright, so I'm going to save this, and then when I come here, I'm gonna render the status here, whether it is booked or it is available for rent. And after that, there is a button called there's a button saying rent now, which you can click to rent. We would implement that later. And after that, we have some of the options, or some of the few details you need to know about the car. For example, the transmission, whether it is automatic or it is manual. We also want to show you the fuel type. In this case it is gasoline, and then here we show you the price per day, right? So a text and another text. So this is going to say 300 Ghana cedis per day. Right, so I'm using the GH currency constant that we have here. Alright, cool. So if I come here, and in place of this I am able to use the car list. Alright, so car list component here, I will import it, and once I save this one, I can come back to my page, and we should see one car here. Let's wait for this to refresh, and there you go. So as you can see, this is our car card. Right, we have the title of the car, Toyota Camry 2023, the type, the body type, which is sedan, and the image. We are later going to use the actual image of the cars. And here we have the seating capacity, we have the transmission, and then we have the fuel type. And as you can see, we have the price per day also here, and then the button to be able to rent now. So to check for the responsiveness, or to check for how a lot of cars are going to be displayed, I can copy and paste this multiple times. And we have 6 cars here. We can come back here, and then after this refreshes, we should see about 6 cars here, and there you go. Alright, so we have about 6 cars here. Now if we try to shrink this, alright, as you can see, when we get to a certain width, it changes to being 1 card per row. Alright, so here, and then when we go even more, for example like this, we have the sidebar disappearing, and then we have just the car list, right? And this if the sidebar disappears, where can we actually find that? If I show you the finished app, alright, so here when it disappears, we're going to see this open filters button here, where when you click on it, we see the filters appear in a drawer like this, right? So that's the next thing we are going to add. I'm going to add this button. So as you can see, the reset filters button disappears. We get this filters header here, and then we are going to add our drawer, which is going to show the button here. So just to point it again how our responsiveness work, you'd see that some of these components I have here, right? So for example, this flex component, I have the responsive properties set here, right? So when it's base, it's going to be column. When it is empty, it's going to be row. So it's changing the direction of the flex, right? So that we can have the side by side when it is a big screen, and then column, just one stacking on top of each other when it is small, or when it is a smaller screen. So these properties are going to change it to rule and column. When you come here on this card, on the filters card, we have when it's space, it's going to be 100%. When it is medium, it's going to be 350. That's the width. And the calculation we are doing here, for example here, so we are subtracting this 300 pixels from the from 100%, so that it will occupy the rest of the space, and then we're going to use the extra 50 pixels as the other spacing around the components, right? This makes it fits nicely. So these are how we are doing like the responsiveness. So you can see some of the components, we have the base and then the MD, just to make sure the layout looks nice on smaller and large devices. Right. So you can, this is just to speed up the UI process instead of writing everything from scratch and taking my time to explain everything to you. I just want to speed up the UI process so that we can focus on the most important stuff, right? So if you want to really understand how we do the responsiveness, just take your time, go through some of these components and look at how we set some of the widths, we calculate the width, how we are doing some of these displays, and how we are changing some of these directions as well. Alright, very, very simple with Mantine. Alright, so again, just to speed up the process, we have this filters drawer component here. So basically we are just reusing some of these components we are creating here. So first of all, we are using the drawer component from Mantine, and it uses this use disclosure. We've already used that before, so you should be familiar with that. And as you can see, we are reusing all the components we've actually created already. For example, reset filters button is also being used here. Select car, price range, year, model, transmission, select fuel type. We are just reusing these components again. Right now, this is the button to open the drawer, which is basically saying open filters. Alright, and it's inside the button. When you click on it, it's gonna call this open from the disclosure. So let's use this filters drawer component and see how it looks like. So here, when we come here, we are going to put it in this flex component. So at the same side of the reset filters button, for example, the filters drawer. So this one, I'm gonna put that component here. And just to point it out to you again, when that component is going to show up, we have this display. When it's on base devices, smaller devices, it's going to be inline block. When it's on MD devices, it's going to be none. So on large devices, we are not going to see this button, which is going to open the drawer. You're only going to see it when we are on smaller screens, right? Yeah, so it is the same thing we have for this as well. So this is going to disappear on large devices. This is going to appear on large devices, and then it is going to disappear on smaller devices. So it is going to exchange with this. So when this disappears, this appear. When this appears, this disappear. Right, that's how it works. So when we go back to the UI, we wait for this to refresh. Let's scroll up and see. And as you can see, we have this open filters button here. Now if we go to a large screen, when the sidebar comes, as you can see, we have this here, right? And we go back again, and we have this. When we click on it, we have our drawer opened, and we have the same filters that we used here. Nice. So yeah, this is working nicely. This is working fine. Now the thing I want to do here is I want to reduce the size of this map a little bit. It's a bit large. If we check with the original one, as you can see, this is a bit smaller. In terms of the height, it's a bit smaller. So we want to reduce it here, but then we want to maintain it on the home screen. So when we go to the home page, you see it's a bit larger than when we are on the car list page. So how are we going to do that? Very, very simple. Let's go to the map component, somewhere around here. We're going to pass some prop to this, which is going to be basically the height, right? So here we are going to say height, like this, and the height is going to be string, basically. So let me just make it as an interface up here in case we want to add more props to this. Alright, and here the height is going to be height. That's the height we pass here. Oh, so didn't mean to. So height, so it's going to be this height. Or if we don't pass any height, then take the 300 pixels, right? Cool. So once we do this, we can come back to we can come back to this component, and where we have the map, here we are going to set the height to 200 pixels, just to reduce the height a little bit. Let's go back here, wait for this to refresh. And as you can see, the height has been reduced a little bit, and I like it this way. Right. Okay, so we have almost all the UI components for our car listing page done. So what we are going to do is we are going to start implementing some of these functionalities. First of all, we are going to make the search engine work. So we can enter some values here and be able to click on search so that we get actual cars from selected regions and countries. We are also going to make the filters part also work. Right. So we still have a long way to go. So we're going to switch back to Supabase for some time, and then set and then get our database in place and create the tables that we are also going to be using, and then we will come back to our app and then come and fetch some real data into our app. So it is time to go to Supabase. Alright, so we are in Supabase, and we are going to start creating all our tables we would have in our database. We are at the moment at the authentication section. Alright, so here when you go to the table editor, here we can create a new table. Right. So we are going to have 7 tables, and I'm going to create all of them. The first table we are going to be creating is the countries table. Right. So from the finished app, as you can see, we have the country table, which is giving us the data for our countries, and that is what we are using here, and any other place that we need countries. So that is the first table we are going to be creating. So I can click on new table, or I can also click here because I don't have any table. I can use this button to create a new table. Right. And this table is going to be called countries. Right, and I can leave the description, and then when I come down here, I'm going to be able to add all the columns that we are going to have in our table. We have the ID, which is an integer. It's a primary key. It is going to be generated automatically for us. We also have this created at, which is a timestamp, and it's also going to be generated automatically. So we are going to leave these two fields there. We're going to add our own. Alright, so for a country, we are going to have the name of the country. So we would have a name, and the name is basically going to be a text. Right, so here there is a text type. So that is what we are going to choose. And what do we want again? So we also want the longitude and then the latitude of the country, so that we can display it on a map if we want to. So that's basically what we are going to have for all our locations, right? So every location is going to have a longitude and then a latitude, and that is what is going to help us show the location on the map. Alright, so you have to add the longitude and then the latitude. So here we would have a longitude, and this is going to be a float. So I'm going to choose this one. Now, so when you look at the description, float 4 is a single precision floating point number, and then float 8 is a double precision floating point number, right? So I choose this one, and I'm going to have the same thing for latitude. And that is basically all. So we have the name, the longitude, and then the latitude. We already have the ID and then the created at, right? So these are all the columns we are going to have in our countries table. So I'm gonna hit save, and we have our first table created. There you go, as you can see. So here we have our countries, right? I have ID, created at, name, longitude, and then latitude. So for example, we can go here and then we say insert a rule. So we get a nice UI to be able to add new records into our table. So for example, I'm gonna say name is Ghana, like this, and I'm going to give it a longitude and then a latitude. So here is going to be the longitude and this is going to be the latitude. So when I hit save, we have our first record for our countries, right? So Ghana, and we can add as many countries as we want. Now the second table we are going to create is the regions table. Alright, so as I said, when you select the country, it fetches all the regions that is in that particular country. Alright, so here if I select Ghana, then I get all the regions in that country. Now if I deselect it, you'd see that this is disabled because it's not, we've disabled the selection actually. As soon as I select a country, then it fetches the regions that are related or associated with that particular country, right? So as you can see, there is going to be a relationship between regions and countries, right? So many regions are going to belong to one particular country. One country is going to have a lot of regions, or it could be states or whatever. So that is the next table we are going to be creating, regions. So I'm going to go here, create a new table, and the name of the table is regions, like this. We have the ID created at. We are going to add another column, and this is going to be called name. So just like countries, we also have the name of the region, and the name is going to be a text. So we are going to choose text, and we are also going to have longitude and latitude. So, and then we are going to create that relationship that we talked about, right? So we say that a region is going to belong to a country. So how do we do it? Now there is a concept called foreign keys, right? So let me first of all add this column called country ID. So this country ID is basically going to reference an ID of a country. So in this case, we have one country with an ID 1. So here, when we go here, it says edit foreign key relation for country ID. Right, so here we are going to select the schema, and then we are going to select which table it should reference to. Right, so here the schema is all the time going to be public, and then the table, as you can see, we have the if you have like multiple tables created, they are all going to show up here. So you choose the table that you want this country ID to reference. So we choose that, and then here we can see all the fields in that table, right? So we want to reference the ID, that is the ID column. Alright, so we are basically going to store the ID of that country here, so that when we are making a fetch for this particular region, based on the ID, we would know the country that region belongs to. Hit save, and then we hit save here. Now after this creates, I'm going to add a record. So here, regions, I can go to insert a new rule. So for example, I can add a random example. So here the name is going to be Greater Accra, like this. Longitude and latitude, let me just put 00 here for now. And here, because the country ID is a foreign key, I can click on select record and choose which country I am referencing. And when I select the country, you see the ID is being populated here. So when I click save, yes, you can see the country ID is this column. So every region is going to have this country ID field, which is going to reference the country the region belongs to. Right. So we have our second table created. Let's also see what other tables are we going to need. We are going to need 5 more tables, right? We're going to need a table to store our bookings. We are going to need a table to store our cars. So all the cars we are going to be adding, we would need a table to store the details. We are also going to need a table to store our reviews, right? So the reviews we are going to leave. And then also we are going to need 2 tables to manage our users, right? So providers and then users. Even though we have the authentication side, which is basically the section we use to manage our users' account, we are also going to have a separate table which is going to save the other details for our users and our providers, right? So when we create an account for a user, we are going to store the login details on the authentication section, but then the other details that are very personal to the user, we want to have a separate table for that. Alright, and the reason why we don't want to add it to the authentication payload or anything like that is because some of the data can be very sensitive, and we don't want to store that data in the browser when we fetch the session for a particular user. So it is a good idea to save that in a separate table. So let me create those tables really quickly. So I'm going to create a table for users. So this is basically for regular users, and I am going to create another one for our providers, but let's see what information we are going to need for our users. And so for example, we are going to have first name, right, and it is going to be a text. We are also going to have last name, that is also going to be a text. And I'm going to go through this quickly. So I'm going to be needing something like the city of the user, the region of the user, the country the user is from, so that we can identify each user by their country. We're also going to save details like their date of birth, their gender, their phone number, their email address, and things like that, right? So I'm going to speed the video and add all these details. I'll come back and then show you all the columns I added. So I've added all the columns we need for a user. Right, so first name, which is a text, last name, avatar, that is going to be the profile URL for the user, so it is going to be a text. We have the country ID, which is a foreign key, which is referencing country ID. It's going to let you choose the country you are from and the region you are from based on that country, and your city, your street, and your date of birth, your gender, your phone. It is also going to ask for your longitude and then your latitude, optional if you have, but yeah, this can be used to also show you cars that are around your location if we want to implement this feature in the future, right? And then we also have an email. So these are the details we are going to need about a user. Now the one thing I need to do is here, the ID is basically not going to be an auto-generated ID. It is basically going to reference the users table we have in our authentication section, right? So if we create a user, we want to make sure the user details we are adding here is referencing the users account we've created, right? The authenticated user we've actually created, right? So here we are going to create a foreign key relationship, and here instead of public I am going to choose auth. So when I choose auth, then here I am going to go to users, as you can see here, right? And what do I want to reference from the users table? So basically the ID, which is UUID. This is basically saying that column types do not match. That's because we have int 8 and then the user type is UUID. So if I go back here, I can choose UUID here, right? And then when I come back here and I do it again, so choose users, now it works. So I can hit save, and as you can see, this is now referencing auth users ID. If I click save, I'm gonna wait for the table to create. Alright, so once the table is created and I go to insert, so as you can see, I can see the select record button here. So when I click on it, it is going to open the auth users table, and as you can see, we have all the authenticated users here. So we can basically select one of these users, and as you can see, the ID is going to be populated here. Alright, so from that table we would know the user, we would know the particular user whose record is this one. So basically we are trying to say that this users table is going to be synced with our authentication table. That's basically what we want. Alright, so let's discard. And we are going to do the same thing for providers, right? So there are two different users, and the details we store for these users are different, right? So for providers, we are going to need things like the cars for the providers, whilst users don't have cars. Providers are going to have cars because they are going to provide cars for users to rent, but they are all going to reference the authenticated users table because they are all users basically. So let's create that table, and we are going to need a similar details as the users table. Just a few things that are going to change, right? Other examples including like the company name, business registration number, contact name, and things like that. We don't have those details for regular users. I'm going to quickly add those details, and then I'm going to come back and show you all the columns I've added for this particular table. Alright, so as you can see, I've added all the columns we are going to be needing for this table. So for example, we have a company name, business registration number, we have the contact name, we have phone, country ID, region ID. These are all foreign keys. We have the city, the street, latitude, longitude, avatar, email. Alright, so these are the details we are also going to need for the providers table. Alright, so I'm going to basically save this. So one thing I forgot to do is to link this as well. So let's do what we forgot quickly. So let's go to edit, and here we want to make sure this is also referencing the users auth table. So first of all, let's change this to UUID. Alright, and here we're going to choose auth, and we're going to choose users and then users ID, and we are going to update this. So added ID, which is a UUID, and it's referencing the users table, right? So if I try to go here, insert, and I choose an ID, for example, alright, it shows me the users, and I can select a user here, and I get the ID. Alright, so that's what we are going to have for our providers table. So we are also going to create the table for our cars. So I'm going to create a new table, cars, and here I'm going to add the columns, right? Alright, so as you can see, I've added all the columns for the cars table, and it's actually a lot. Alright, so let's go through them and see. So first of all, we have a slug. So a slug is basically a unique ID which is going to identify this car. Yeah, I wanted to keep this ID like the auto-generated ID, but I wanted to also create my own field which is called slug. So yeah, we are going to be using this slug field, and I'm using UUID. Normally we are going to be using like the name of the car and blah blah blah, but I will just keep it as a random unique ID which is going to be generated. Now we also have the make of the car, which is a text, the model of the car, a text, the year of the car is a number, so numeric, the description, which is a text, the color, which is a text, and then the fuel type, which is also a text. So this is a type of the car, that is a body type, which is a text. We have the transmission, the engine capacity, we have images, right? So here where we have images, even though I've chosen text, but then as you noticed, images are going to be like a list of images. Alright, So this is going to be like a list of all the car images we are going to have. Now Supabase actually makes it very simple. When you click here, you can check this checkbox which is saying define as array. Alright, so the type is supposed to be a text, but then when you check this, it is going to be an array of text, so basically an array of strings, which is very cool. So I'm gonna save this, and I have engine capacity, which is an integer, number of bags, which is an integer, number of doors, which is an integer. Now AC available is a boolean, right? So the boolean type is actually here, it's part of the types. AC working is also a boolean. Now other features, just like the images, are going to be a list of all other features that we've not actually listed here. So here I'm also going to click on this, and I'm going to choose define as array, and I'm going to save it. And when I come here, this is the minimum rental period in days. So how many days at least do you want to rent the cars, and how many days at most do you want to rent the car? So maximum rental days. These are all integers. Now we have price per day, which is also an integer. The status, which is a text, which is basically going to say whether the car is booked or not. So we have the country ID, the region ID as well, and then the provider ID. So this provider ID is referencing the providers, because so this car is going to be added by a provider, and we need to be able to know the provider who added the car, so we store the ID of the provider here, right? It is also the reason why we made the provider and the users table separate. So these are all the fields we are going to have in the cars table. So I am going to hit save. Alright, so as you can see, our cars table is created. Now we are going to add two more tables, which is the bookings and then the reviews table. I've also gone ahead and added all the columns for our bookings table. So here we have the car ID. So this booking is for which particular car, so we need the car ID here, and as you can see, it's referencing cars and then ID. Alright, so we have the pickup date, which is a date. So one of the types we have for these Postgres data types in Supabase is the date type. Alright, so if I scroll down here, as you can see, we have date type. We also have the time stamp, we have the time type, we have the timestamp, and others. So basically, go through this type and then choose whichever one you think is appropriate for your data. Alright, so in this case, dates. So pickup dates, this is supposed to be return dates, not two pickup dates. So we have the pickup dates and then the return dates, which are all dates. And we also have the total price, which is the price of the car you are renting based on the number of days you have for the pickup, between the pickup and then the return dates. We have provider ID, so which provider does this car belong, this car you are renting belongs to, this car you are booking belongs to. So we need a provider ID here, and which user is booking this car, we need the ID of the user here as well. Now we also have the status of the booking, so whether the booking has been completed or rejected or is pending or whatever. So we need the status. Alright, so these are all the fields, and I'm going to hit save. Alright, so these are also the fields for our reviews table. So first of all, we have the car ID. So a review is going to be for a particular car, so we need the ID of the car here. Now this is going to be the rate, so if you rate 3.0, 4.5, 5.0, whatever, here it's a float. We have the comment here, which is going to be a text, so whatever comment you're going to make about the car. We also have likes and dislikes, how many people liked this review, how many people disliked this review. Now we also reference the user ID and then the provider ID. So this is basically the user leaving the review, and this is basically the provider who the car belongs to, who this particular car belongs to. So yeah, we store all these details here so that we can actually fetch the details about the providers, the users, and then the car easily. Alright, so yeah, these are all the details you're going to need for the reviews table. So I'm gonna hit save, and that is going to be all the tables we are going to ever need. Alright, so these are all the tables. We are not going to create any table again. So we are going to just go ahead and add a few data to some of the tables, and yeah, we can actually fetch those data in our application. Alright, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and added all the regions we have in this country ID. Right, so the country ID that we have here, so that is Ghana. I've gone ahead and added all the regions we have here so that we can actually have some records to be able to fetch in our front end. Alright, so yeah, so as you can see, basically the columns we added. Alright, so here I looked for the longitude and latitude for all these locations and I added them here. So you can go ahead and do the same if you want to use the same regions for this particular country. I can go ahead and add a link to the CSV file for this. Right, so for example here I can do exports as CSV, so you can have access to the CSV file, and when you go to insert, for example, you can do import data from CSV and import them, and you'd be able to have all of these provided the column names are the same. All right, so I can make this data available so that you can import it into yours if you are using the same regions, at least for testing. But yeah, this is what I have added, and we also have one country, so we are now ready to fetch some data into our application, at least for this side and then this side. Yeah, right. So when we go back to our app here, normally we are going to be fetching the data in our server components. All right, so in this case we have the search engine here and we are using it on the home page. We would make the server side call at the server side component level, and we are basically going to pass it through props to the immediate component, which is going to pass it to the search engine component, and that is also going to pass it to the selector we have here. Alright, so that's a country selector and then the region selector through props. Now when you think about this is something we don't want to be doing because it is something we called prop drilling. So we don't want to be passing intermediate props that are not going to be used. When you look at this search engine component is used on the home page. It is also used on the car listing page. So when we do this, it means on the car listing page we have to also do the same thing for the props to get to these components. This is not actually something we want to do. We want to avoid that. So when you think about this, it actually makes sense to make the call at the component level, right? One disadvantage with making the call at the component level is when we make the call at the component level, the fact that the component is reused at different places also means that there is a potential to be making multiple calls, right? So for example, if we make the call inside this component using a use effect, probably when the component initializes, we are also going to be fetching it when we visit the car listing page because it is also going to be initialized there, and wherever we use the country selector. So we have the potential to be making a lot of different calls in our application for just one component. It is also something we want to avoid. So how do we solve that issue? That is where we are going to be using React Query. So if you've not used React Query before, React Query is a popular library. So it's a powerful asynchronous state management for TS and JS, that is TypeScript and JavaScript, and it can be used in React, Solid Vue, and Svelte applications. So React Query is very, very good. It gives you a good developer and user experience, and it's going to help us manage our state, our server side states very, very easily on our client application or on the client side. All right. So if you've not checked out React Query, be sure to check it out. They have a very good documentation as well. So everything we are going to be doing from setup to how we use it, you can find it in the documentation. So go to Stack and then React Query, or just Google it, and then it will take you to this documentation, and you can check it out. All right. All right, so let's see how we can set up React query in our project. All right. We've installed the package. If I open package.json, as you can see, we have stack React query, the package itself, and we also have React query dev tools package installed here, right? So this is going to give us a nice dev tools during development, to be able to see like what is happening with our data fetching. Right, so you'd see that very shortly. But how do we set it up? Now, if I go to app here and I go to layout, alright, so normally this is how I am going to be setting it up. Alright, so I am going to first of all import two components from React query, right? So let me import them here. Alright, and let me also import the one component we need from the dev tools, which is the React query dev tools, so that we can use that right away. So when I basically do this, I am going to create an instance of the query client. So here I'm going to create a constant which is query client, and it's going to be an instance of this query client class, and I'm going to be using this query client as a value for the query client provider. For example, like this. Let me bring the closing tag here, and here, as you can see, the required prop is the client, and then I pass the query client which I initialized up here. Right now, I also want to use the dev tools, this one, so I can use it anywhere within the query client provider. So let me just put it at top here like this, and I'm passing this initial is open, setting it to false, because we don't want the window to be open initially or by default. We want to open it when we want to, so we are setting this to false because by default it is going to be true. So when we do this, normally it is supposed to work, but you notice that this component is a server component, right? So we are going to have an issue. So when I visit the page, you'd see that we would have an error. So as you can see, only plain objects and a few built-ins can be passed to client components from server component side, and that is because of this. So how are we going to set this up then? Right, so we are going to create a file here. So here we are going to say query provider.ts. I'm going to generate the boilerplate. Alright, so I'm going to say React, so React query provider like this, and I'm basically going to move all the setup I have here. So for example, this one, I'm going to move it. I'm going to put it in this file. I'm going to also going to move the imports as well, all the imports. I'm going to move them here, and I'm also going to move these, and I'm going to put them here instead. So let me get that closing one, and then I'm going to replace it with this. Alright, so I'm going to make sure this is going to accept the children instead. So like this, and here I'm going to mark this component as a client component. So use client like this, and here children is going to come as a prop. So children, I'm going to pass props here, which I'm going to create up here like this. Let me import this as well, and then let me make sure this component looks okay. Let me save it, and when I come here, let's see what is wrong with this component. Actually, I think I have this issue because it's supposed to be tsx instead of ts. So let me go to rename tsx. Alright, so once that is renamed, I can save this, and when I come here, I am going to use this instead. Alright, so that's why I was passing the children here. So here, when I come here, I can basically say React query provider, and I can import it. Okay, and once I save it, this file is looking good, and we will be able to go back and see that our application is working just fine. Alright, so when we go here, wait for it to refresh, and we should see that everything is back to, yeah, once it loads, we see that everything is working fine. There is no errors again, but one change we see is this button or icon we see down here. Right, so when we click on it, as you can see, we see the dev tools from React Query, right, Stack React Query version 5, and here is where we are going to see all the interactions we are going to have with React Query, right? So all the data we are going to be fetching and everything, we are going to be able to see it here. Alright, so this is a very good window, because with this we wouldn't have to go to the dev tools or like do some console logs to be able to see like the data we are fetching, because we would be able to see all of them here, and you'd see what I am talking about shortly. Okay, so once we have React Query set up, we know that it is working. Let's actually start fetching some data for our countries. Alright, so with that, the first thing I'm going to do is to add the service. So I'm going to add another service here. So this one is going to be location.service.ts. That is because we are going to make the database calls related to our locations, like our country and our regions, our streets, and things like that. So I like to separate them like this. So inside location.service.ts, I am going to add it as service for. Okay, so as you can see, I have this get all countries async function here, which is basically going to return countries in the end. But here I have an instance of Supabase, right? And I am doing Supabase.from countries, and I do select. I select everything from countries. A few things missing here. So for example, the database we use here, and then the iCountry props, these are all missing, right? So let's first of all add these props in our models. Right, so I'll go here, go to index, and I'm going to add the props here. Okay, so as you can see, I have the country props here, and as you can see, the import is resolved. But here, this is basically the columns we added in our database, right? So these two, and then we added the name, the latitude, and then the longitude. Right, so that is the properties our country that is the properties a country is going to have, and it's going to be the same thing for regions, right? So here we have region props, and we are going to say extends iCountry props like this, and it's going to be the same properties, so we wouldn't have to worry about that. When we get to regions, we can just use these we can just use this interface, this type, straight away. So once we do this, as you can see, the import is resolved here automatically for us. Now it is left with this one, this database. Where do we actually get it from? I'm going to show you. So when we go to our Supabase, so go to the API docs section here, and here if you go to introduction, you can see there is a button here which says generate and download types, right? So Supabase is going to automatically generate and download all the TypeScript types for you based on your database tables. So if I click on it, So it actually generates it for me, and I can actually go to where it was downloaded, go to downloads, and I can add that file. So the file is called supabase.ts, the downloaded file. So I am going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it inside modules like this. So as you can see, supabase.ts, and here we have all the types for our databases, right? So this is export interface database, and here we could see like all the tables, for example bookings. We could see other ones like cars, so including all the relationships we have for our table, and all the CRUD operations as well, right? So as you can see, there are the types, for example this one, number or null. So all the columns we have with their types. So it's a big file, as you can see, very long. So there's no need to look at there's no need to go through like everything happening here. Just copy the file. Supabase is going to generate it automatically for you, and once you add it to your types, I can now use it here. So as you can see, I'm importing from model Supabase, and that is what I'm adding as a type for this. So this is basically going to help us know the kind of fields we are going to be selecting from our database if you want to, and that is going to be very helpful. So we are going to save this, and we are basically going to use React query to call this function. So with that, we are going to use a hook. Alright, that's because we want to be able to reuse that hook wherever we want to make the countries call. So we have the service here. Let's close it. Let's close some other files that we don't also need right now again. Close this, and we want to go to hooks. Here we are going to create a file called use countries.ts. Alright, and here we are going to say export function use countries, like this. And the first thing we're going to use from React query is the use query. Alright, so this use query hook from React query, and we get some values from use query. Alright, so we would see the values shortly, but here we need two properties, and we pass this object, and the two properties we need to pass are the query key. So first of all, the query key. So the query key is supposed to be an array. Alright, so in this case we're going to call it countries. Alright, so we're just going to add one key, countries, and then the second property is the query function. Alright, so this query function, and that query function is basically supposed to be an asynchronous function, so it's going to come from the service we created, which is saying get all countries async. That's one. So this is basically what we are going to do. Now, even if we use this use countries multiple times in different components, because we have this query key here, what React query is going to do is that whenever there is this key and there is a data, if we call this hook again, it is not going to make another call, right? Because this data is going to be cached. It is only when the data changes, or when we probably refresh the page or visit the application again, or the data changes in the database, that is where it is going to refresh the data. Alright, so it is very cool, very cool using a React query to do something like this. So we are going to prevent the multiple calls, but then we are also going to be able to get the updated data from our database. Okay, so what values are we going to get? We're first of all going to get the data. If it is successful, we are also going to get an error if there is an error, and we also have the is loading state that we can get whenever the data fetching is in process. Right. So with this, let's actually rename the data to countries. I like to do it like that because that is what we are fetching. So with this, we are going to return these three values from our hook. So first of all, we're going to return countries, we are going to return error, and we are also going to return is loading, like this. Alright, so we save it, and then we can now start using our hook. So where are we going to use this use country hooks? First of all, we are going to here inside, so in components where we have select country. Alright, so this select country is a reusable component being used in different places. So here we are going to use the hook here. We're going to say use countries, which is coming from hooks, and we are going to destructure the values we get. So constant, now we get the countries we get is loading. What we want to do is we want to add the disabled prop to this select, and say that when it is loading, when we are fetching the data, just disable this select. But when it is done, we want to, instead of these strings, we want to pass the country's data to it, right? And as you know, it is coming from this iCountry props, which consists of the ID, the name, the longitude, and then the latitude. So here, instead of this list, we are going to do countries. So countries is going to be either a list or undefined. So first of all, we need to check if it is undefined. So if it is undefined, we are going to do something here. Otherwise, we are just going to return an empty array. So if it is not defined, if it is defined, if it is actually defined, what are we going to do? We are basically going to say countries.map. We have country, and this time we don't want to return just the strings. We want to return an object with label, label and value, like this. So what is the label going to be? So it's going to be country dot the name, and the value is going to be, I'll just use the ID for the value. Alright, so country dot ID, because the IDs are going to be unique and different. Alright, so once we do this, we should be good with this one, even though this is complaining. So what is it saying? It says that type label string or undefined, it's not assignable to type. Okay, so basically value is here, this is a number, so we need to do dot to string. Alright, so let's see if this is gone. There's still another error. Okay, this time the label is a string or undefined, but the type is supposed to be so label type is supposed to be a string. Alright, so as you can see here, so type string or undefined is not assignable to type string. Alright, so here the name, because the type is string or undefined, let's just do this so that we get rid of the error. So once we save it, we should be able to see our countries being fetched, right, if our query is actually correct, that is from the services. Here we do Supabase stuff from countries, and then we select everything. So it's just a simple query, so it's supposed to work if there are no errors. So let's go back to our application and then check what happens. Alright, so we go here and then we check, and actually nothing found. There is no data here, which means we don't have any data. So let's go back here, and then here, as you can see, because we have a query key set and it triggers, we see the query key here. Right, when we click on it here, we would see that from here the query is actually being made, right? But the data we get from the query is actually empty. Interesting. And that is the reason why we don't actually see any data here. So the query is being made, the server call is being made, but we are getting an empty array. And why are we getting an empty array? I'm going to tell you why. So let's go back to our Supabase again. So here, let's go back to our tables, and when we go to countries, so when you click on this arrow, you'd see here where it says view policies. So there is a concept in Supabase called policies, and these policies are what makes your table accessible by users. So every table you create in Supabase, you need to add policies around it, and that policies is going to make your data available for users. So it is important to know the kind of policies you add to specific tables. That is because you don't in your application, you might not want some data to be accessible to some users, but only a specific set of users, right? So whenever you are creating policies around your tables, you need to think about it, how you want the data in that table to be accessible before you write those policies. Now, if you don't understand, for example, when we look at our application here, right? So this is what we want to fetch the data from. This is from the finished app. As you can see, there is no user logged in at the moment, but we still see the country's data, right? And that is how we want our application to behave. Same for the regions, right? So in this case, we want to write a policy around the country's table, which is going to allow every user, or allow our application to get access to the data, even if there are no users, even if there are no authenticated users on the platform. So when you visit the application right away, we want you to be able to see like the country and then the region, right? And later, when we are using the country and then the region components for users that are creating accounts, we also want the same thing. So if a user is not registered or hasn't created an account yet, they still should be able to see like a list of countries and be able to select from it, right? So it means that we want this data in our countries table to be accessible by any user at all without any restrictions. So here we are going to go here and add a new policy, right? So we have the get started quickly, and then for full customization, I'm going to choose get started quickly for this one. But when you choose get full customization, here you can add your own policies. Right? So these are the operations you can select. So for example, in this case, it is a fetch or select operation. So select, and then I can add whatever constraints or expressions I need here. Now there are built-in templates that has been done by Supabase for you already. So for example, here you see enable read access for everyone, which is basically what we want for this table, for the read access. So we are going to select this one, and then we go to use this template, and as you can see here is just true. Right, so true means that allow what is selected here, that is a select access, the read access for all users. Right, so let's go to review and then save policy. Once we add this policy for our countries table, as you can see here, we should be able to go back to our development application, and right away as I visit this, you see that the empty array changed to an actual data here, and as you can see, we have one item, and if I open this, you can see we have the country details, right? Ghana, which is very, very cool. So even without refreshing the application, as soon as I visit it back, as soon as the data changes in the database or the policies around it changes in the database, we get the updated data here. That is the power of React Query, and it is very, very cool. So if I go back here, I now should be able to see Ghana here, right? So it means the data is now available to us because we now have a policy around our countries table. All right, so let me refresh and see if the is loading is also working. So if the data is being fetched, as you can see, the selector should be disabled, and once the data is fetched, then I should be able to see the data now. It becomes enabled. Very cool. that is how we are going to be using React query. So that's a lot of the work for us behind the scenes. So we just have to worry about making our server-side call, passing some appropriate keys to it, so that when it identifies those keys, it is going to just cache it and not make multiple calls, right? You can read a lot about React query in their documentation, but yeah, this is the limit. We are going to go with it. So very cool. All right, so let's also concentrate on the regions and then fetch the data for that. And as I mentioned earlier, the regions data is only going to be fetched when we've selected the country. So that means when we come here, so let me close this for now. So that means that we have to now add the value and unchange handlers on this select component. So I'm gonna do that here. So let me make sure I am importing this, and here I'm going to add props, and I'm going to destructure the label, the value, and then unchange like this. Alright, so when I do that, I can come here, and then after I'm gonna change this one to country so that it wouldn't look as if that's what is selected. And here I'm gonna say value. This is going to be value. I'm gonna say unchange, which is going to come from the unchange prop. And we are also going to say label. So we want to pass the label. We want to have the default as country, so in case we want to change the label. And let me also change here to null like this, so that this is going to pass. I want to add this here quickly, and I also want to add 2 more props. So the filter and then the max drop down height. So let me get that under here, and I have to import the options filter. We've added it's in functions. We've added, so it's in the functions file. Alright, so once I save this, we can go ahead, and where we are using this, make sure we are getting the value, and then also when it changes, we do something basically. So as I said, here when we click on it, then it's going to trigger a server-side call again to fetch the regions data. Alright, so let me also open the select region component and add the same props, but this time I am going to add this extra prop, which is called selected country ID. Alright, so this component is going to use that selected country ID to make a call to fetch the regions associated with this country ID. So I am going to import this one, and then here I'm going to destructure the props. So I have label, I have value, I have selected country ID, and I have unchange. And same thing I am going to do here. So here I am going to say label, or this. I am going to change this one. I'm going to say your region, and I'm also going to add the height, and then I can add the value and unchange, right, and then the filter as well. So there you go. And I also have to add the extra type here. Let's import this as well, and this should look good. Yeah, so here we are also going to make a server call. We are going to create a hook called use regions, just like we did for select country. We have this hook here. We are going to create another hook there, but first of all we would basically add the service, the location service. And also, before we add the location service, let's just go back to Supabase and then add the policy for our regions table as well before. So here, this is our regions. We go to view policies, and here, as you can see, there are no policies. We are going to add new. Let's go to get started quickly, because this is the first one. The first one is what we want to add. The region is also going to be accessible by anybody, whether authenticated or not. So we choose the first one, and we go to use this template, review, and then save policy. Alright, so once we have the policy, let's go ahead and add the service. Alright, so inside the location.service file, the location service file, I am going to say export constant. I'm gonna say get regions async, which is going to be an async function. I'm gonna add a return type here, which is going to be a promise of so we added the I regions props. Alright, so it's going to be a list of this. Alright, so this is going to be the return type, and here we are also going to do try and catch. So this one, and inside here, what I am going to do is, now this get regions async function is going to basically accept the country ID, and it's going to use that country ID to fetch the regions associated with that country ID. Right. So here I'm going to say country underscore ID. That's basically how we have the name in our database. So I'm just using the same naming convention here. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to make it optional, and it's going to be a number basically. Inside the try and catch, I am basically going to check and see if the country ID is not undefined. If it's not undefined, this is where we are going to make the fetch. If it is undefined, we are just going to return an empty array like this, where we're going to make the fetch. So here, where we are going to make the fetch, first of all, we are going to create an instance of our Supabase. So let me just copy this and then put it up here. Alright, and then inside here, I am going to say constant. This is where I'm going to get the return values. I will do await. Alright, and then Supabase dot. Alright, we do dot from like this, and then here we pass regions. And then we do dot select. We want to select everything, right? So we are selecting from the regions table all records. This is where we add the constraint, right? And the constraint we are going to add is, we are going to actually select all regions where the country ID is actually equal to this country ID we pass here. Right, so the way we do it is we do dot, and then we have this function called equal. Right, so as you can see, equal, which is basically equal, and the first argument we pass is so as you can see, these suggestions here showing the columns we have in the table, and we are basically getting that because of the Supabase type we have here, right? So without this type, if I remove it, I'll show you. If I remove this type, right, and I do this, There's no way we are going to get any suggestions because this doesn't know the types, it doesn't know the columns we have in the database. So that's why we added this type here. So as soon as we do this, it is going to give us suggestions on the columns we have on the table. So this is what we are looking for, country ID, and it's supposed to be equal to our country ID. So that's the second argument we pass, just like this. All right, so it means here we are going to get data, which I'm going to rename to regions, like this, and I'm going to return regions. Alright, so as you can see, because the type is actually coming from the database, even though it's the same as the type we have here, but this return type we have here is actually coming from this type. So what we want to do is to do as I regions props, like this. I just want to cast it. So it's the same thing we did here. And then here inside the catch, we are just going to say throw new error. We are just going to say regions could not be loaded, and let's save that. So once we have our service in place, let's now go and then create the use regions hook. Alright, so new file, use regions .ts, and inside here I'm going to say export function use regions, and here I'm also going to pass the country ID, which is going to be optional. Type is a number. Right, and here I'm going to say use query. So let's use the use query hook again, and here going to get the values. So basically we are going to get is loading, we're going to get data, which is the regions, and we are also going to get an error if there is any error. So here, just like we did for the use countries one, we are going to pass an object here. So the first property is going to be the query key, and it's supposed to be an array, right? And this time we are going to pass two items to the array. That is because we also have a dependency of country ID here. Right, so we are going to say regions, and then the second argument is going to be country underscore ID. Right. And the way this is going to work is here it's going to say regions country ID, right? So whenever the country ID changes, that is where it is going to like refetch the data. So for example, country ID 1 is going to be saying regions with a country ID of 1, and if we have the same thing for the next call, it's basically not going to make another call if the country ID is the same. Right, so it is only going to make the call when the country ID changes, right? And that is basically how we do it. So we pass the regions, and then we pass the dependency, which is basically this, as a second argument. Okay, so we also have to pass the query function like this, and this time we are going to pass it as a callback function. That's because we want to be able to do the get regions async like this, and then pass a country ID there. Alright, so once we save this, then let's make sure we go ahead and return is loading. We return regions, and then we also return error if there is. So we will go back to select region component here, and then here we are going to say use region like this, and we call use regions with a selected country ID. So this one. Okay, so here we have the regions, not data. So we have regions. We also would get this loading, and here we're going to do a similar thing. So we are basically going to say regions. Alright, if there are regions, then we are going to map through. If not, we are just going to return an empty array. So here we do regions dot map. Alright, and then we get region. We pass a callback function here, which is going to return an object with a key label as region dot name, and that we also need a value, which is we are going to basically use the ID to do just like the other one. So we do region dot ID. Let's just say ID. Actually, with no S, and then we do dot to string like this. Alright, so if this is null, we just want to pass empty just to resolve this. It's actually not going to be null. So once we do this, we should be able to get the data for our regions if our service is working well. Let's also just use the is loading. So basically we want to do disabled is loading. Now we should be able to get the data for our regions. Select our region selector if our service is working well, but this is actually not going to work yet because we've not wired the value and then the onChange event as to when this is actually available. When we check right now, it is going to be undefined because there is no selected country ID. So what we are going to do is we are going to go back to search engine because that is basically where we are using these components. So we're going to go back to search engine here. As you can see, we have select country, we have select region, and we are supposed to pass the props to these two components, right? So we want to be able to let these components know their value. We want to be able to let these components know the selected country as well, to be able to show that. And this is the beauty of when we are using React query, right? So we want to get the values, that is the countries and then the regions that has been fetched. We can add use countries and use regions here again. So this is going to be selected country ID. Alright, so here we can use this use countries hooks here again, and as I mentioned, here depending on whichever place fetches the data first, this is going to use the cached data. This is not going to make other calls again, right? So this in a way is also serving as a global state. So basically we can reuse these without worrying about whether we are going to have multiple calls or not. So here we are going to use these two hooks in here like this, and first of all we are going to create a handler here, which is going to be the onChange handler that we are going to pass to this and this. So first of all, let's create for the country. So here we're going to say handle country change like this, and we know that the onChange handler actually gives us the value, which is a string null like this. You can see from here, right? and then in here, what we are going to do is we are going to check if countries data exists. So if countries. Alright, and then here what we're going to do is when we select, we are just going to get a value, so which is basically going to be the value here, and we're going to filter the data and then make sure we actually take that selected country as the country which is selected and show it in the select components, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to just say const. Alright, this is going to be the selected country. So we're going to map through countries by doing filter. So when we get country, we are going to check and say get us the country whose ID. Alright, it is a number, so let's just do to string is equal to value. Alright, so we do this, and we know value is either a string or null, so that's fine. Alright, and because we are doing a filter, we just have to do .0 because it's going to give us one item. Alright, and here we are going to get a country console.log country. Actually it's supposed to be in the if here, so let me not forget to add const. So this is going to be the unchanged handler for my country. So here, if I show you how it works, I can do unchanged like this and then pass that function, and let me comment this out for now and then show you. So if I save it and I go back to the app here, let me try and open the console. Let me make it bigger. Okay, so here, alright, so if I try to select a country, it is going to hit the unchanged handler like this, and as you can see, we have the country data here. Alright, so this is a selected country, so if you had multiple countries, I select another one, you will get the data here. So we are just adding an unchanged handler for that. So when we select, it gives us the country, and the ID of the country is 1. So if filters get us that object. What I'm going to do for now is I'm going to basically add some local states here, right? So I'm going to say use state. Now this is going to be selected country. Here we have set selected country. It is going to be like this. We have I country props. Let me make sure I am importing this. Okay, so selected country is this undefined. So here I'm going to basically say set selected country to be this. Alright, and down here I have my unchanged, but I also want to pass the value, so let me pass that as the first prop. So value, which is going to be selected country. Alright, so selected country dot ID dot to string. Alright, so when I save it, let's also try and here say that we have region selected country dot ID like this. Alright, and then I'm going to add a similar handler for our regions. So what I'm going to do is here I'm going to say handle, so handle region change, which is going to be the same thing, and here instead of countries going to be regions. Alright, so this should look good, and when I come down here I can add it as an on-change for this. Alright, and let me also get the value, which is basically going to be selected region dot id dot to string, like this. Alright, so we just wanted to add this on change and then value. We just wanted to add this value prop and on change prop to our selected, so that we would be able to interact with the component. Alright, so when there is an on change, we get a value for our components. Alright, and these are the handlers we've actually set up here. Alright, so when the country changes, that is when we select an item from here. What do we want it to do? What do we want it to do? So we just want to set this country state. Alright, and that country state, we have the ID, we pass it to this use regions. So as soon as that country state changes, we get the ID, it is going to trigger this use regions. So basically the ID has changed, and it's going to make a fetch for the selected it's going to make a fetch for the regions based on the selected country, right? So when it goes into use regions, it is basically going to see that okay, the ID changes. So let's call this service, which is going to select from regions, and then it's going to return the regions data. Right. So here we pass that to select regions, and we pass the on change handler for select country to its component as well. And with this one, when we go back to the app and we try to interact with it, so let me make this a bit smaller. As soon as I select a country like this and I come here, nothing actually found. So let's open React query and see what is happening here. Alright, so here as you can see there is regions and regions. Now that is when nothing is selected, so no ID, and that's not going to make any other call again. But here where we have one ID, so we can basically see that there are 16 items. So there is this array with 16 items selected. So we can see that the data is being fetched. So if I open one, we actually have the correct data. So that means that here we should see the data, but it's still saying nothing found. Why is that? Okay, I think I know why. That is because here select region, we also need to pass the selected country ID, just like this. We are passing the value, the unchanged, but then we've not passed the selected country ID, which is making the actual call to fetch our data, because we are not passing the data from here, right? So you can see. Alright, so we just want to make sure this is present, so that inside the component here where we have use regions, it can fetch from the cache and then it can present the data here. Alright, so I am sure this is going to work now. So let's go back to our UI, and then we have a country selected. We have a country selected already, so we click here and there you go. So as you can see, right, Now if I deselect the country, so let's say I don't select this country, as you can see, nothing found. But as soon as let's go open this one again. So as soon as I select the country again, so you see this comes here and I have the data present, which is very cool. Okay, so I have my regions data being fetched now based on the country ID, and it is looking good. Alright, so the next thing we are going to do is to make sure that based on the region we select here, we get the coordinates and then show the location on the map correctly. And as you know already, we have the longitude and latitude coordinates for these regions in a database already, so we are just going to use that. So right now, when you look at these two components, so right now our next goal is basically trying to get the coordinates for the selected region, right? So for example, if I select this region, I want to be able to get the coordinate for this region and show the location on the map. Now when you think about this, these two components are not related. They are separate components, and they are in different places. So if I basically go back to the code and show you, so this is basically the search engine component, right? And this is where we've actually set up the local states, where we are storing the selected country and then the selected region. But if you check the file, this is a separate file. The map is not actually being used here. So the coordinates are on these states. Alright, so how can the map get access to the coordinates on the selected region? Alright, so we can open this one and have a look. So click on this, right? So each of the region is having the longitude and then the latitude coordinates, right? So how can we get to know when we select the region here? How can this map get to know the selected region and be able to pass the longitude and latitude to from here to here? So this basically means that we have to get ourselves in a position where when we select an item here, or even if we select any of these items here, different parts of the application would be able to know the items we've selected, and if they want to be able to use the selected items, they will be able to use that. Right, and what I mean by that is later we are going to also on the cars listing page, we are going to be able to, so when I show you the finished app, so for example, choose this, actually let me choose all, and then select any random dates. Go to search. So on this particular application, we also want to be able to we want this part to know the selected items from here, right? So we also have the map here as well. Yeah, so how can different parts of the application know what we've selected here? Alright, so that is basically where we are going to be using context API. So we are going to be using context API to store the global state for these selected items, or the items you're going to be selecting here, so that different parts of the application can actually have access to those items and then use them if they have to. Alright, so it means that these states here are going to be moved into like a global state, where the map component would also be able to have access to those states and be able to use their coordinates. Alright, so let's actually set up our context API and then connect it to our application, so that all components of our application would be able to have access to whatever is in our context. So with that, let's look for the context folder. So I'm going to close everything here, and then I'm going to come here, so we've already created this session context. So yeah, you are basically familiar with how we are going to be creating the context. So that is going to be our second context that we are going to be creating. That is going to be the main context actually. This is for our sessions. So here I'm going to create app context .tsx like this, and first of all I am going to say create context from React like this, and I'm going to give it a constant name called app context. And I'm going to actually type this, and the way I'm going to type it is so let me put an interface here. So interface I app context like this. And what am I going to have in I app context? So when we think about all the things we are going to have in our context, so this is supposed to be context. We are going to have our state, which is basically going to be these values that I'm going to add here. It's basically all the items we have on our page. So this from country, region, car make, pickup date, return date. That is basically what we are going to have here. So let me import these types, import them. So import, then let me import this from mountain dates as well. Alright, so here our state is going to be I app state. That's why. And then our context is also going to have all the updater functions that we are going to be using to update these states. Alright, so this is how they are going to look like, right? So this function is going to update this country, region. So we're basically going to pass the selected region, which is an instance of which is a type of iRegin props, iCountry props that we created. And same for the car make, pickup dates, and then return dates as well. So this is what we are going to have in our context. So we have the state, we have these functions, individual functions to update each of the properties in the state. So that is the type we are going to basically have here, right? So I app context, this, since this can also be undefined, I can just say undefined, and then we will not pass a value here, so I'm just going to say undefined. So once I do this, then I am going to add some initial states, which by default is going to be undefined for all. And so our selected country, our car make, this one, let's also make this like this. Okay. Alright, so by default they are all going to be undefined because we're not going to have anything selected for any of them. So that's going to be our initial state. Alright, and we are also going to create the provider component. So here I'm going to export constant app context provider, which is going to receive children. It's going to come from, let me add a prop up here. So it's just a React node, and say props, and then here basically going to return app context dot provider like this, and we are supposed to pass the value. Alright, and here we are going to pass all the values, so just like this. And we need to make sure we have these functions set up, which we are going to do very shortly. Let me just keep them here for now. Okay, and then in here we are going to pass children. Okay, so this is where we are going to set up our states. So we'll say use states, set state. So basically that is how it is going to be like, and I need to also give it a type. First of all, import this app state, which is going to be initial state, right? And then I am going to have a function for each of these to update each of the properties in our state. So basically each of these properties. So I'm going to copy those functions and paste all of them, and I would just go through quickly with you. So here, alright, and then let me import this use callback from React. Okay, so let's just focus on these aspects for now. So there is a set country function, which is basically going to say set state, get a previous state, spread it, and then the only thing we are going to change is the selected country, right? And the selected country is basically from our state you see here, and that's the same value we are passing to this our function. That's why we do it here. So this is basically the same as doing selected country like this. So we just use the shorthand. Okay, so as you can see, for the regions we also pass the selected region, and then we set it. We get all the previous states, and then we just set the selected country. Same for car make, and then pickup date, and then we have pickup date, and there should also be return date. Forgot that. Let me put that here as well. And we also have the return date. Okay, now you can see that I am using a use callback hook here, right? And this is basically for memoization. If you know about React Memo, what this basically does is that this is going to return a memoized version of the callback, which is only going to change if one of the inputs actually changes. Right, so you'd realize that later we are going to be using some of these functions in use effect, and for some reason when you use this function in a use effect, it is going to ask you to add it as a dependency. And when you add it as a dependency without this use callback function, it is going to cause an infinite loop. It is going to cause a lot of re-rendering, which is going to affect your application's performance. So when you have this use callback hook here, it is going to make sure that it memoized the value so that it does not actually make the call multiple times. It only returns the value when the input actually changes. Right? So yeah, this is just to prevent some weird infinite rendering in use effects. Basically, React recommends we use this to prevent that. So it's basically for memoization. So it is very simple. This is just this whole file is just making sure that it keeps our state, and then we are able to update our state if we have to. So we have all these functions available to us. Okay, so I'm going to save this file, and the way I'm going to be using this is just as we did, we create a hook for our context. So what I'm going to do is we're going to basically create the same thing. So let me just copy this and then bring it here, because I just want to speed up the process. Alright, so how do we use it? First of all, let's go back to our layout. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to say app context provider. And then once I save it, all our children are going to have access to all the states and then the functions we have here. Alright, so let me close this. Let me close this. Let me close this. Go here. I'm going to go back here, and then I will go to search engine again. Right, instead of these local states, we are going to replace this. Right, so here I'm going to use our hook called use app context, like this. Right, and I'm going to get their values. So here I know I have access to the state, right, and on the state I can get the selected country and selected region. So let's just comment these out for now. So it says state does not exist on type I app context or undefined. Okay. So I think this is basically happening because in here we just said this is I app context or undefined, right? So I'm just going to say as any here just to get rid of this. And then when I come here, this should be resolved now. All right, so here I have my selected country and I have selected region. All right. Okay, so I also need to get the updater functions. All right, so we have set country and then set region. So instead of set selected country, just going to say set country, and here set region. The rest is supposed to be exactly the same way. We just removed the local state and made it global, so that later whenever we want to use any of these properties, we can use it in different parts of the application, just like we are going to be doing in the map component. So let's just go back and just check that our app is working. So here, as you can see, we have an error because we are missing use client in our context. So let me just go back here and then just add use client like this. And once I do this, it should work now. All right, so as you can see here, select, and then this becomes enabled, and then we can choose. All right, so what we're going to do here is let's close this. Let's go to map component here. So inside the map component, first of all, we are going to get our selected country and region here so that we can get the coordinates. So here we're going to say use app context like this, and I'm going to say constant. I would have access to the states, and here I would have access to selected country and to selected region. Now the reason why I'm also getting the selected country is that I will fall back to the coordinates of the selected country if there is no region selected, right? First of all, I am going to show the coordinates for the selected region if there is, but then if not, I'll fall back to the country's coordinates. Okay, so as you can see here, the way we are showing the marker on the map is by showing the coordinates in an array like this, right? So we have the latitude and then we have the longitude as the second item, and then here we also have it as the center, right? So we are basically going to get the values and then change it to a list like this, right? So here because I want to fall back, I'm just going to basically create a function for it, right? So I'm going to say function get coordinates like this, and so I want the return value to be like this, number and then number, right? This is the return value I want. So here I'm going to say if selected region, first of all, if there is selected region, then this is basically what I'm going to return. Alright, so as you can see from the suggestion, I'm going to say selected region dot latitude and then selected region dot longitude, but you know the types for these latitude and longitudes are also optional, so I just fall back to 0 and then 0 like this. If we have item selected, we are not going to get this, we are going to get the latitude and longitude, so no worries, just to check that we all the time have a value there. We are going to also say if selected country. So if selected country like this, then we are going to do the same thing. Alright. Otherwise, we just want to return the static coordinates that I have here. So if we don't have either a country or region selected, we just want to show this. I mean, you can put any value there provided it's a valid coordinate which is going to show a particular location. Just put any coordinates here and should be fine. Down here, I'm going to basically use this. So get coordinates. Alright, now if I save this and I check from the UI, you would notice that so when I select a country, for example, like this, and I select a region, you notice that the marker is actually gone. Alright, and it's not like it's disappeared from the map. It's actually there, but the marker has actually moved to the location we've selected here. Alright, so if I zoom out, you see that the marker is actually still there. Right, so as you can see, it's actually here, but so as you can see, Greater Accra, so it's basically here. When I change it to maybe Ashanti, you'd see that it moves, but then it's going to move to where we have like Ashanti region. So as you can see, Kumasi. Alright, even though it works, like the marker actually moves to the correct positions, but that is not like the kind of behavior we want to achieve, right? So we want the map to actually move as well to where the marker is also going to be positioned, right? So if I show you the finished app, let me go back to the home page. So if I select Bonga halfway here, so you see that it moves to the location I actually select, right? The map actually updates. So that is basically what we want, the behavior we actually want to get, right? And the way we are going to do this is now this marker, I'm going to move this marker into a separate component in the same file. So here I'm going to say constant, and I'm going to call it map marker, and what I am going to return is the marker I actually copied. This. Now here I am going to remove this get coordinates because it is not accessible in this function, and I'm going to put first of all latitude and then longitude, right, like this, and that is going to come as a pop. So we have latitude and then longitude. Alright, so I am adding it as I'm adding this interface called map marker props. So here I can get that, and down here instead of this text here, I'm just going to use name, which is also going to be passed as a prop. Alright, so the reason why I moved this into a separate component is because we are going to be using a hook from React leaflets, which is called use map. So it is basically a hook we are going to be able to use to change the view of our map. So it is called use map, so it's from React leaflet, and it will give you an instance of the map. So here we would get an instance of the map, right? And when the position actually changes, so here when the coordinate actually changes, then we are going to change the view of the map, right? So we're going to put a use effect here. So use effects, let's make sure we are importing it, and the dependency is going to be latitude and longitude as well. So when they change, we are going to just say map map dot. So there is a bunch of properties and functions on it. Now the one we are looking for is basically called set view here. So set view is also supposed to accept the coordinate, which is basically going to be this. Now because we are using the map here, we also have to add it as a dependency basically. So when we save this, we should be able to use the map marker here instead. I'm going to use the map marker here. We need to pass latitude, we need to pass longitude, and then we need to pass name. So first of all, the name is going to be, we also want to check because it's going to be whether region or the country. So we check if there is selected region, it means it is a region's coordinates. So region dot name. Otherwise we want to check if selected country, right? And then we also want to see selected country dot name. Else we just want to put an empty list here. This one, it's supposed to be this. Yeah. Okay, so let's pass the latitude and longitude. So it is basically going to come from get coordinates, right? So whatever is going to be our coordinates, we just select the first item as the latitude, and then the second item, which is one, going to be our longitude. Okay, so because we have map.setView here, whenever the latitude and longitude changes, it is going to update the map by setting a new view to the latitude and longitude that we have here, right? And that is going to give us the behavior we actually want. So here, let's go back to our app and then test it again. So I'm going to select Greater Accra now. So as you can see, I get that. If I select Ashanti, now I get the map placed at Kumasi. Now it's at the center as well. It's visible. Northeast. Yeah. So now it is working. It is working just fine. I just need to refresh this. Yeah, I think it is working. Let's go to Central and wait. Yeah. So now it is working fine, right? Even though it's a bit slow to load, but yeah, it's still working fine. Our zoom level is also working fine. Yeah. Alright, so now we are able to get our marker on the map showing the correct location when we select from here or here, which is very cool. Okay. Alright, so that's how we are going to end this part. Actually, we are going to end part 4 here. I think it's a great point to end part 4 here, and that is because we are going to switch our attention to the providers page, right? So before we're able to get work on the car listing page, we are supposed to get real car data from our database, and these cars are going to be added by providers, right? So I think it's a great point to start creating the provider page. So we are going to let users create provider accounts, be able to go to their dashboard, add new cars so that we can list all the available cars on our providers page. And then we are going to come back here and make sure that we are able to click on search, get all the values here, and then go to the car listing page and be able to list all the available cars and be able to also book those cars. All right. I am really excited about the next part. So don't forget to like the video if you find it helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you've not subscribed yet, and also turn on notification so that you get notified when I post the last 2 sections. But yeah, thank you, and I am going to see you in the next section.